you're wearing the wrong color today. I really hate purple. Like, and it's not that
Stephanie.
It's not that you hate purple, but it's just that day you hated purple. But how do you, like, if someone had this issue and they really took a look at themselves and they go, I know what she's talking about because I have the same thing. I judge people. I'm racist. I'm this, and I don't like this. I don't like that. You know, I really want to say that one of the biggest things is to learn how to respect yourself. That's one of the first things, is respect yourself, and it will help when you respect the people around you. I'm just going to tell you what my one line is, and it's, my name is Stephanie Anaka. I'm an Anishinaabe woman from Manitoba. I was taken at 3.5 months by the Canadian government and human trafficked through the Child and Family Services. Now, it's a loaded question, and it gives me a lot of reasons to hate. But is that going to get me ahead? It's not.
Yeah, exposing the truth. Unlearning. What did I learn in school? Nothing that was positive / negative. It's like, but we didn't learn about residential schools, so it's learning the truth and like, we need to right the wrongs. And that's a reconciliation. Like, that's my take from a person of white privilege of like, holy crap, I didn't know this stuff. And that's not necessarily on my teachers. That's what, the curriculum was at the time. That's what I learned. So having to unlearn some things from my past that were presented, and it's like, let's just break it down.
I think it's what you're both saying, right? It's a family, it's our own experiences, it's our role modeling, but also the things that hold us back too are because if we haven't dealt with our own inner, and they say like you treat other people how you're feeling yourself. So if you're feeling, that you don't deserve love or whatever, and I went through all this stuff, that you externally, you don't treat the people with kindness, and because you have nothing left to give. Hi, I'm Denise Young, CEO and founder of Tiger's Eye Advisory Group. In today's episode, I'm going to be chatting with Stephanie and Dee here, and what we're going to be chatting about today is how do we actually create belonging? How do we create that resilience? How do we actually be vulnerable? And also kind of getting into some insights around the three of us and what our shared lived experiences are. When we're looking at all these different perspectives, different identity factors, that how much actually similarities there are, not only within Canada, but actually across the world, right? Yeah. And then for me too, it's, hearing both of your stories, like from, trans women, Indigenous perspective, and mine is that I'm in all of these different worlds because I'm of European and Asian descent. And it's interesting, plus being adopted. So I remember thinking, it was just about a year ago where I was just like, I feel like I don't belong anywhere. And now it's about flipping the narrative, and I got called out on it. And somebody said, but Denise, what happens because of all your experiences? You seem to connect really easily with people. What happens if it's you belong everywhere? And it's about sharing that. It's about I'm a hand talker. It's about sharing that narrative, and I think that's why my vision, for the next, oh my goodness, it's in less than a week. No, it's a week. When is the event now? But anyway,
it's a week from Wednesday. And I was like, a week tomorrow and fly.
We're getting packed and ready to go.
Yeah.
But I really feel that that's what this event is about. It's truly bringing everybody together in one space and picking people such as you two that have that authentic voice. You bring yourself wholeheartedly, and I think people resonate to that piece, and that all of us belong everywhere. And I think from your perspective, right, it's just I guess what are both of you looking for too for the event? It's just there's so many. I mean, we have 20 speakers.
20 speakers,
and there's just so much different perspectives in the room. That is there something that really stands out for the both of you?
Something that is for me is something that I really want people to understand is that community is so important, and to just sit down and have conversations with other people in your community. Like, just stop living the individualistic life and just get out of that zone that you're in and go, you know what, I'm going to go to my neighbor, I'm going to have a barbecue, I'm going to fight all the neighbors, and get back to that community. Because when we were younger, we could go to our neighbor's house, knock on the door, hey, is Jill home? You know, it was very relaxed, and it wasn't like how it is now. And there's just so much stress that people feel, that I really feel for them and their struggles that they do on an everyday life. You know, some of the kids at university, it's just, you know, their perspective, you know, at 20 or 21 or 22 years old is just not like how we were when we were 20, 21, you know, riding our bikes in the neighborhood and stuff like that. They didn't grow up like that. And it's like, could we bring that back? Could we bring that atmosphere of being community again? Please.
We're gonna try.
Yeah, 100%. The community aspect, and that you're saying that when we've all gotten together on the Zoom calls with the different speakers,
Yeah.
I have been able to find something that I connect with at every speaker, and it shows that, well, I can resonate with that person and that connects with me.
Yeah.
Is that we are so much more alike, we have way more in common with everybody than we have our differences. And we really need to focus
have that conversation.
As you said, growing
Yeah.
up, it's like, you know, remember when you knew what a block parent sign was in the window? And that was important. You knew that was a safe space to run to if you had to.
Yeah.
And my God, I don't think anyone would understand what that is today.
They have no idea, right?
It's like,
They just...
I welcome anybody in my door. You know,
Yeah, me too.
I don't often lock my door. I'm not going to tell you where I live because I just said I don't lock my door.
Yeah, where do you live? Now I want to know.
Well, you
used to camp out at your house.
You're in the winery industry, so
Not,
you might have
not
some.
yet. It's been almost a year since I've been out of the wine industry. You know, no, this is my passion.
Yeah.
I found my passion,
Yes.
and it's about creating community,
Yeah.
recreating community.
Recreating community is an excellent way to put it, because it's something that we all had when we were younger, and it seems to have lost somewhere in the last 25-ish years.
Yes.
And
Yeah. You know what got me into that is, you know, I'm kind of embarrassed to say, and I might be dating myself.
Oh.
But I don't know how many of you used to watch Little House on the Prairie.
this girl did.
And it was interesting because I started watching it again, and I realized how much actually little even racist innuendos are in that, but on the same hand, it really talks about how you are showcases in the moral. Of course, you know, when you're 13 or whatever, how old you are, you're not thinking about, oh, what's the moral here?
Yeah.
And of course, now with my brain, I'm like, wow, this is really a show that talks about building a community and going back to those roots. And I think when you're both talking about that, you know, other than, you know, they make some, you know, they actually do make some racist comments in there, but it is really about supporting one another, being able to just go knock on the door. And I think that's what the vision really is for the leadership conference coming up. And one thing I want to process here with both of you too is that, because in terms of, you know, people attending and things like that, I know there's a lot of hesitation because, as somebody said, I said, we're disrupting, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about equity, diversity, inclusion. It is, but it's bigger than that. Kind of, I think what you were talking about earlier, Dee, just really, it's about, let's connect on a human basis and understand each of us are unique.
Yeah.
we're all diverse, because that's a common thing too of when I teach equity, diversity, inclusion, I go into rooms and a lot of the times there's, white people in the room and they don't think they're diverse. And I said, but you are diverse. Each and every one of us are diverse. And then on the flip side, the people like such as myself, all of us who have one of those maybe underrepresented identity factors that we think we're exempt from this work. And we're not. Each and every one of us is. No. So I would like to hear both of your perspective on how do we change that narrative of people coming into the space that we're creating next week. And we of course, we created a great space here in Kelowna in May, and whoever was in the room thought, they felt, okay, yeah, this is like no event that we've attended. Like we actually feel included. So how do we get the people, I guess, in the room? And I'm not talking about just the event, I'm talking about in the room to build this community, go back to the roots, go back to supporting each other, go back to actually listening to people and saying and trusting. So if somebody says, oh, this is my perspective on something, that we're not in there and we're not just going to go in there and start just, judging.
I feel that maybe society, I would say people, I mean society, feel very reserved, whether it's in the workplace or in community, whether it's saying the wrong thing or just afraid to be vulnerable. And when you're guarded, reserved, and afraid to be vulnerable, how can you be authentic? Who is that authentic person? And even right up to our leaders, and I mean leaders in the sense that, those that might hold, manager, supervisory roles, leaders in community, that, oh, you can't say that, or you can't say that, well, you can never divulge this or that. Well, why not?
Right. Yeah.
Why can't you just,
why can't you just
be
talk?
vulnerable? And, a good friend of mine, she always say, I just can't believe how vulnerable you are. You stumble, you fall down, and you get back up and you dust yourself off. I said, it doesn't matter how many times you fall, as long as you get up one more time than you fall. And that's how I lead. That's how I've always been a manager. I don't hide anything. And
if you can look up, you can get up.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I think society doesn't know how to do that. And they're afraid, and there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, like how do you just show up? I mean, that's the biggest thing. I just had that lesson the other day where I was very hesitant about showing up for something, and it was actually something that I ran into Stephanie at. And I have to say, it was one of the most beautiful days I had, and I was in my own head, and I was like, I don't want to show up, and I made all my assumptions and my judgments and say, well, I'm not going to have fun, and you start going in that head. But I said, nope. I said, I chose and I signed up for this. I'm going to to support a couple people. And the biggest lesson was just show up. Just show up. And if at any point you feel that, okay, this space is not for me today, you can leave. But when you show up, I always say, when you show up, magic happens. And
it's a step for yourself to sit there and go, I really didn't want to go to this today. I didn't really want to show up. And then you show up and your insides change and you feel better and you're in a great space and you're like, wow, I'm really glad that I showed up. And you really have to congratulate yourself for stuff like that. And be very patient with yourself. Not to the point where you're like making excuses for everything and going, no. There's a little bit of taking advantage.
Oh, I do that.
But, Denise, getting back to your original question, for me, if it was to, have people go back to, how can we go back to what you were talking about before? Some of the thoughts that came, I had to go back to the younger and going, let's go for dinner together. Somebody in the foundation, in our foundation, he said, we need to just go out and have dinner or go out and do something where we're just not talking about the foundation, but we're just finding out about each other. And that foundational work is what really makes makes you strong as a foundation is doing that base foundation work and then building on top of that, because now you know who your partners are in the foundation. And again, the same with the speaker convention. It's like, I remember you from last year, you know, you remember me. It's building that connection and the foundation. Oh, you spoke last year. Yeah, we got it this year. We know what's going on, you know, and it's having those reoccurring, but also welcoming in the new ones that do come in and include them, right?
Yeah.
Because it's very important that we do that.
Yeah, it's creating those authentic relationships, and I think that just makes such a impact on whatever we're doing. And you know, when we're talking about, you know, our biases that we have and things like that, and it's proven that if you hang around with people who are not like you, and I use that because, you know, because we look at somebody, we make those snap decisions in 3 seconds, and it's been proven that unconscious bias is based on, because it's our hindbrain, it's normal, and I think that's the important thing to remember, that we all have them. And I remember thinking like, wow, I teach this stuff, how can I have them? It is human nature, but the more we get to know other people and ask those uncomfortable questions and say, because if you're coming from an authentic perspective, saying that you really want to understand that person, things happen and you start building the community and you start building that trust. And I think that's what this is really about, is so many times people say they're including, but we're still staying in our groups of people, if you want to say it, where we're not all truly coming together in one room. And I think that has been a vision for me forever. And that's why, you know, even with speakers, you know, that when we intentionally pick the speakers, that you are in that same area too, that your vision is to, I don't care who you are. And I always say this, it's like, if I don't like you for whatever reason, because we all don't have to get along, right? But I think it's that respect and the genuine and that authentic thing. But I always joke with people and say, well, if I don't like you, it's because you're an actual asshole. I don't care what you look like or whatever it is, it's because that's what it is, right? But when we make these assumptions based on other people, and I hate to say it, I still do it. But what do we do? But what do we do with it? It doesn't come, it might come in my brain, but it stays in my brain. And then how do I react to it? You look at it and you say, where is that coming from? And almost every single thought process of what you have is through your cultural experiences. So it's what you've learned. And something that happened to me, say last week, could automatically create a bias for me now. Because maybe somebody hurt me, or somebody did something, or somebody did something to somebody else. Automatically now you're going to group that person how you see it. And unfortunately, that's never going to go away.
It's not going to.
Exactly.
It's not going to, and we're always going to have that, where we're always going to look at people and be like, you're wearing the wrong color today. I really hate purple. Like, and it's not that
Stephanie.
It's not that you hate purple, but it's just that day you hated purple. But how do you, like, if someone had this issue and they really took a look at themselves and they go, I know what she's talking about, because I have the same thing. I judge people. I'm racist. I'm this, and I don't like this. I don't like that. You know, I really want to say that one of the biggest things is to learn how to respect yourself. That's one of the first things, is respect yourself, and it will help when you respect the people around you. You know, if you can respect yourself and go, I'm good. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody's the same. Everyone's on their own different path, on their own different journey. Love you.
And every day is different.
And every day is different. You know, I think that respect is a starting point when it comes to an individual. Your home, the things you do, the people you surround yourself with, right? If you want to make a difference, do it. Passion, have your passion. If you don't know what it is, find it. Spend the time with yourself to find it, because that is important.
So how do you, I guess my next, conversation thing that I want to kind of get into is, I'm always in awe of people such as you two, where it's
She's so great.
They paid me, just kidding.
The big bucks.
Yeah, exactly. No, but it's just like, and I think about, like Juan and Maria here, who also are doing, they're such community givers.
Yeah.
And some of us are, and some of us aren't.
Right.
And then how do you, what do you feel, I guess, what am I trying to ask? I know what I'm trying to say up here. It's because some people are just naturally always looking out for other people and giving back to community, and everybody who is in this room is giving back from the community, and we're driven by the passion to make a difference in this world. So where do you think that comes from? Yes, I get it. When you experience stuff, that's one thing, but there's a lot of people who go through stuff too that still do not give up, and they're actually maybe they're a little bit more negative. And I always say this, how do you think, I guess, having that growth mindset, if you want to label it, is, where do you think that comes from?
That's a good question.
You know what? There's stuff that's happened in my world that is just from birth, and it's gone on way long before that, I was even born, but I was born into my culture. And for Indigenous people, when I talk to people, and I said this to a lady here in the city, I said, I'm just going to tell you what my one line is, and it's, my name is Stephanie Anaka. I'm an Anishinaabe woman from Manitoba. I was taken at 3.5 months by the Canadian government and human trafficked through the Child and Family Services. Now, it's a loaded question, and it gives me a lot of reasons to hate, but is that going to get me ahead? It's not. So I think that dealing with your intergenerational trauma, and that's for everyone. That's not just for Indigenous people. That is for everyone. Dealing with that intergenerational trauma and coming to terms with that, and understand that some of that stuff is out of your control. You have nothing, don't focus on that. Focus on the good, the positive, and not everything in the world is fluffy and everything's going to be a bed of roses. I get that. We're going to have some hard conversations, but we need to have those hard conversations to go through to get to the other side. If we just shy away and we have that fear factor, we're not going to get ahead. We're not. So.
Well, for me, I honestly don't know where it's always come from. Perhaps just learning from my dad from a young age. He was involved in community organizations, and kind of opened our home to whether there were people coming for after business dinner because they were in town, or we had often hosted international exchange students. I went on international exchange, and just that, take the opportunity. And I've honestly always been community driven. It's not what do I get back, it's just always I want to give to community, to make community a better place. And community can be the community in this room, it could be the town you live in, it could be, for me, the queer community. Community means so much to different people. Yeah. But you build community, and I'm such an extrovert, I want a large community around me. And perhaps it's because I'm an extreme extrovert that I just want to give to community, so that there are many people around me that it feels good. So the history of it, I don't know. I've always been that way.
Yeah, and I think for me too, because when I even reflect on my life too, that I worked a lot in corporations, and even though I still kind of gave back, I was just so focused on the corporate, how do I look, and you know, how much money am I making and all this stuff. But because it wasn't purpose driven, I could never figure out why. And all my jobs were kind of that purpose driven stuff. But I found right before I started my own business that unfortunately, you know, that I was in kind of one of those situations where I was doing very purpose-driven work, and then that all got taken away from me. And I couldn't figure out, I went depressed, I left on stress leave, and all these other pieces of also not being treated appropriately. And then going into my own business, and then my values still weren't aligned because it was about the money again. And I think about 2 years ago, well, probably when I first, because I've had this vision for this event for the last, 5 years, and I finally said, I don't care about the money, this is about me creating community. And then I'm going to be, I finally finished my book on, you know, finding my place, a journey to authentic leadership. So it took me a lot to reflect. And the reason I asked you that question too is because I've given it a lot of thought too. And I think a lot of it is based on our upbringing.
Yeah.
And because I even think about my family unit, you know, somebody said, we had a multicultural family because I was adopted, my brother's adopted, my sister was my adopted parents' biological daughter, but there was, you know, it was infused with, you know, with European, Japanese, Chinese, Indigenous, and all these things. And then I remember having that thing, so there was no room for any judgment in our family. And my dad was also a cultural anthropologist, but I look at him and say he always creates this belonging to the point of, I spent a month with him in Mexico and I can't remember what he did, and I looked at him, I know this sounds funny, but I'm like, Dad, you're being too nice. And I had to step back and I'm like, wow. Yeah. And I said, that's why I think where I get that from, and it's not a bad thing, and sometimes we think it is. And I had to reframe it, and I said, well, I would rather have somebody be too giving. Yep. You and I were talking about this yesterday, actually, is I would rather be too giving than not giving enough. Yep. And if people take advantage of me, so be it. I would rather come and say, you know what, I think for the most part, people are good. Yep. And people, you know, sometimes some people are just in their own journey. I think what you were talking about too, about that intergenerational trauma. And if you don't work through it, or you don't know where these experiences are coming through, then I think that's a huge piece of this too. So I think it's what you're both saying, right? It's a family, it's our own experiences, it's our role modeling, but also the things that hold us back too are because if we haven't dealt with our own inner, and you know, they say like you treat other people how you're feeling yourself. So if you're feeling, you know, that you don't deserve love or whatever, and I went through all this stuff, that you externally, you don't treat the people with kindness, and because you have nothing left to give. Yeah.
4 years ago was when I found out, 4 to 5 years ago was when I found out I was a 60s Scooper, and cried for 2 days and was like, God, I didn't even know the human body could do that. But it was, I realized that there was other people in the world or in Canada here like me. But then I also had to stop myself from crying and going, okay, how are we going to change this into a positive? So right from the get-go, it was like, how am I going to do positive for 60 Scoop people across Canada? And that's how I look at it. Like I've done my healing. I've been in counseling. I've gone to Peru to do ayahuasca. I've done sweat lodges, and it's just an ongoing process of healing, healing, healing. Do I think that I'll ever be done? I actually don't. And I've accustomed to the fact that I won't. And because I've done psychology and I'm an Indigenous major, I look at it like it's not a bad thing to have a counselor. You know, it's just one of those things. It's like, do you have a dentist? Well, you have a counselor. You know, it's just one of those things. It's like,
the counselor will make you feel better.
Exactly. A dentist, well, we're not so sure, you know, it might make you look pretty, but it's like when information comes in to your cognitive brain, you need to unload sometimes. And if you have too much going on in upstairs, maybe it's time to unload. And maybe it's time to really look within. And a lot of this, again, I'm going to go from an Indigenous lens, very spiritual, is look within. And what is it that you need? How do you need help? How can we help you? How can we as a community help you? Please reach out, because a village raises a child. Well, you know what? A village can also keep you sane. Right?
And just even discussing it, talking,
Yeah.
being more open about,
Yeah.
mental health. I've had some mental health challenges.
yes.
Most of us have.
Most,
So
yeah.
it's
Right here.
normalize
Yeah.
that. I talk about it
Yeah.
to the point that some people feel uncomfortable. But that's intentional. Because when you
a
get
hard
to those
conversation.
uncomfortable spaces,
Yeah.
that's when you start to make progress.
That's when you're healing.
That's when you're
Yeah.
healing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the more we can do it, the more it'll normalize, and it's okay to, to talk about this stuff,
Yeah.
because the more we try to keep it in, and those are those reasons why I went on stress leave a couple times, because it was the environment I was in where I felt I was not allowed to bring my whole self to work. And it's tough, right? Because then you're fighting it on the way, and you're like, okay, I can't show emotion. I can't show I'm burnt out. I can't show this. I don't want to look weak. I don't want to do this. And you're
Yeah.
putting all this stuff through your
Social
brain.
status, right?
Yeah, social
Yeah.
status.
That's
And we
exactly it.
we have to get away from that. And I know that somebody's coming in next week, and there's a gentleman, Christopher, and he's going to be talking about the impacts of mental wellness, because that's one thing too with equity, diversity, and inclusion. What people are doing right now is they're separating it. So you have equity, diversity, and inclusion. You have mental wellness. And then the other piece too is something that we're going to be talking about too, is just truth and reconciliation is something that is separate from equity, diversity, and inclusion, but it's also integrated. And I think we have to look at everything together instead of going this, and this. And that's-
Individualistically.
Yes.
That's individualistic. We need to get
Yeah.
to that round table and have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's tons of stuff that we could keep talking about. And I guess, like, for the purpose of the event too, I mean, there's so many good things coming up. We're doing an empathy walk, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be eye-opening for people, and it's going to be about holding that discomfort, because I think right now in today's world, EDI is so divisive, and it's not about taking away the terminologies, because I feel that we can't take away the terms, because then you're taking away the essence of it. It would be just like taking away the words truth and reconciliation.
Yeah.
Like, that would be insane, because now you're we're already like, that's the whole
How do
thing
you go
about
backwards? You don't go backwards.
yeah,
you
and
go
I
forward.
think and I
Move
think
forward
people
here.
are changing the words.
Yeah.
And for me, and I'd like to hear both of your opinions too, because for me, I'm kind of a both and person, where I can kind of understand the reasons why and the reasons why not. However, I feel if you take away the essence of that terminology, you are, and I'm just going to be blunt, you're catering towards white privilege. And it's
100%.
and it's not about, and on the flip side, I understand why EDI has become so divisive, is because on the other side, the people sometimes doing this EDI work are attacking people. And this is, and when I say attacking, I'm not talking about physically, I'm talking about
With
just
words.
shaming
Yeah.
and blaming other
Yeah.
people. And I don't believe in that.
No.
I say, yes, I understand the reason why. And I said, but EDI is not about what people think. They're assuming all of these things. And that's actually one thing we're going to have a huge discussion about at the event, is let's break down equity, let's break down diversity, let's break down inclusion, and let's talk about what the words mean. And then we're going to discuss, should we actually change the words? So it's not a either or perspective, it's a both and all perspectives are welcome as long as it's done through open and respectful dialogue. But what are your opinions on the EDI terminology?
Breaking it down just as simple as, what are the definitions of these words? It's just explaining, what this is. It's acknowledging, past wrongs, truth and reconciliation.
Yeah.
Exposing the truth, unlearning. What did I learn in school? nothing that was positive slash
Right.
negative. It's like, but we didn't learn about residential schools, you know, so it's learning the truth and like, ooh, we need to right the wrongs. And that's a reconciliation. Like, that's my take from a person of white privilege of like, holy crap, I didn't know this stuff. And that's not necessarily on my teachers. That's what, you know, the curriculum was at the time. That's what I learned. So having to unlearn some things from my past that were presented, and it's like, let's just break it down and start to put it in front of the table, in front of you on the table, and like, you know, and you get that aha moment, and like, okay, now let's build this community.
You know what, in regards to this, I kind of look at something happened this morning. I was in class at the university, and it was like, the teacher asked for a land acknowledgement. So I'm like, we know what they all are, right? And it's like, I'm not saying a word. They're not for us to do. They're for Western Europeans to do. Mm-hmm. But yet another Indigenous woman from Treaty 6 went and did the land acknowledgement. And it's like, it's not for us to do, you know? And it's learning how to undo what has been taught, because I grew up in a Western European world. And now being a two-eyed seeing person, seeing that way, and exactly what you're talking about, Denise, you can see both sides. And I get it, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here, but you know what, all this stuff about EDI or DEI or whoever wants to say it however they want, what are you doing in the background? Is my question. What's with the showcase of all this? Why? We're all human. You have multiculturalism in Canada and in the US. You have diversity. I'm just gonna go back to the respect thing. Respect yourself, respect each other, respect your neighbor, show the love. Because there's too much individualistic and not enough community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and unfortunately that's the way that we've been raised in this society.
So we need to fight against that, and we need to come together, and we need to put that step forward and argue and go, no, Denise, you deserve to be here. Dee, get at the table. I want to have a conversation with you. I want to know how you feel. I want to know what you think, and what are we going to do about it, you know? Because that's the conversation that should happen. Mm-hmm. It's the fighting, the individualism, it's gotta go. Mm-hmm. It's gotta go. There's so many things in the world, like Mother Earth is hurting. Mm-hmm. And it's up to us, because we live here, to help that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all responsible for this work, and I know one thing about, you know, when you're individualistic, you know, you come back to the land, right? In the mm-hmm. Western society, it's about me.
Power.
Yeah.
Possession.
Power, yeah. Whereas Indigenous, it's about like, it. I was born into me, because it is my duty to be a caretaker of the land. And I remember hearing that the first time when I first started working in Indigenous communities, and I remember that has always stuck out for me. Yep. Is to say, because that kind of changed much, that shifted for me too, was because, yeah, it's like, I know I'm very individualistic, and I still can be, and I sometimes fight that but I'm also very community too, and I'm fighting that because that's the way that we were brought up. And so we need to really go back to that collective and go back to supporting each other.
Land knowledge keepers.
Yeah, and in creating that education, the awareness, and the desire to change. Mm-hmm. But what's going to get people to change? Because unfortunately, we know people have to think, for some people, has to be, what's in it for me?
Right, of course.
And so what do you think it's the what's in it for me?
Yeah, individualistic again, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. What am I going to get out of it? Yeah. How am I going to, lace my pocket? That's what's important. Mm-hmm. Is it really? Is it really going to matter in the end?
No, it's not.
right?
In say what's in it for me, you know, for those attending, no matter what background, what you come from as an organization or you're coming from a business, I break it down to, if you're coming from a business, what's in it for me? It's like, well, I would like to be part of an organization that, you know, where people enjoy coming to work every day, put their best foot forward every day, enjoy being there, go home happy, go home safe, and, you know, your organization thrives because everyone's there to put in their full amount, because everybody is respected, is welcome to be there, and
it's a safe
even
space.
if you're the head of that company, then what you've created, what's in it for me, what you've created is a very strong community within your workplace.
You're adding to longevity of human beings, regardless of whoever they are. If they come to work and they have this great environment, or they're going to school and they have a good environment, and their teachers love them, or their managers are, hey, how's it going? You're adding to their longevity, because stress is the silent killer. And no matter what we do and everything we have, Denise, your work, my work, it's so, yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time and being here today, and really looking looking forward to both of you on stage in a week and a bit in Edmonton. And I think this is really about anybody. It doesn't matter if you're a manager, leader, employee. I always like to say this, that we are all leaders. We all have the power to change. However, and as part of that leadership, the authentic leader, we need to be able to be, you know, whatever you want to call it, resilient. We have to be able to navigate this tension. We also have to be vulnerable, that what we were talking about. And I think that this conference is different than other conferences, because it's truly about us, exactly what we're just doing here today. It's about having a conversation. It's not about me being up on stage talking at you. It's about each of one of us. When we're speaking, we're going to be engaging the audience, and we're going to be saying, so what are your thoughts? And I always say that how we get here might be here, but how we get there, people have different perspectives. And that's what I want to hear. I want to, because that's the thing, because a lot of people think, well, we need to get here by this. Well, no, there is not one right way. But if all of us have that vision of just making this world a better place, where everybody feels seen, heard, and acknowledged, I strongly believe that we can do this. And it's as simple as take away everything, see people for how they are in that unique perspective, but also just see people as human beings. And I think we talked about that. And so really looking forward to the event next week, and hearing from everybody, and having conversations that matter.
Thank you.
Thank you. 100%. Thanks for hosting the event, and making this space even available to people, so that their voice can be heard in a very authentic way, Denise.
Thank you.
You definitely help the people whose voice have a hard time getting out there. So,
thank you.
And it creates those conversations, and I've heard conversations that continue beyond the conference. People that are really changed by it.
Moved by it,
I saw a change in my sister even.
Oh, really?
I invited her last year to join in, and I think she was really moved, and a lot of her perspectives changed just from attending last year, and that was very special even to me, because I saw something change in her for a much more positive, much more broad sense. And so the conversations that happened for those 2 days, it's just we could keep going. Well, we can't, because we take that back and keep the conversations going. And thank you for creating that.
Well, thanks for being in my circle, and it's just And I just say this is what happens too when you're intentional and you pick the right people to be in your circle. And it's about amplifying each other's voices because we're all doing it for each other. Because I also look at it from a speaker perspective. You're coming in, you're honoring me with your time as well. And I really appreciate your traveling to Edmonton. And let's just hope
It'll be
good
great.
news, the weather's going to be good.
Yay! Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
So thank you, and we will see you next week.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.